person, Gladys Berejiklian. Thank you very much.
I've known her for a very long time, and I've always known her to have the highest levels of integrity and to be a very honest person. I never would have thought that Gladys Berejiklian would be the subject to this process. It's not something that would have ever crossed my mind.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help me God. I do.
When she first appeared before the Independent Commission Against Corruption, Premier Gladys Berejiklian was merely a witness. The watchdog's focus in October 2020 was the former Liberal member for Wagga Wagga, Daryl Maguire.
Daryl Maguire had been around Macquarie Street for a long time, but he was always known as a bit of a wheeler and dealer.
Maguire had resigned in 2018 after a separate inquiry heard he'd sought commissions for property development deals. The new ICAC inquiry was investigating whether he'd used his position to advance other business interests, and it had made an astonishing discovery.
You're in a close personal relationship with Mr. Maguire.
It was kind of like, does she mean she was in a romantic relationship with Daryl Maguire? And the shock was just incredible.
Under oath, Berejiklian told the Commission she and Maguire got together when she was Treasurer. She kept seeing him even after she sacked him from the Liberal Party, before finally calling it off in 2020.
Well, I was shocked, very surprised. I'd never seen any suggestion of any kind of relationship between Gladys and Daryl.
ICAC heard telephone intercepts of conversations between the pair where they called each other Hawkes, an Armenian term of affection.
Hello.
Hi, there's Hawkes, it's me.
Barev, doing?
How are you doing? Are you in the paddock already?
No, I've got to go to work. I've got too much shit on.
After her appearance before the Commission, Berejiklian said she was living through a personal nightmare.
I can't tell you what it's done to me personally. It's been devastating, and I've had to bear this on top of everything else.
She kept the confidence of her colleagues, survived 2 no-confidence motions.
Will you admit that you were his sounding board for corruption?
And launched a media blitz.
It's hard to take in, and it was a shock. It was a shock for me when I found out.
No, I found it so sexy. You got no idea. I thought this is amazing.
I had to tell the whole world about what I've been through.
The Premier revealed the pair had been in love, contemplating marriage. He had a key to her home, and yet she never introduced him to her family.
He wasn't my boyfriend, he wasn't anything of note.
Gladys was a very professional politician, capable, fairly straight up and down, a relatively no-nonsense politician. And I think that was one of her strengths as a Premier.
The public loved her, and they just definitely bought the story that she was dudded by a dodgy boyfriend who didn't treat her well and then, left her heartbroken. I think there was this really strong sense that, Gladys Berejiklian was there when everybody needed her, and she'd been dealt a rough hand.
The Premier clung on for another 12 months, leading New South Wales through the COVID crisis.
Good morning, everybody.
Then ICAC confirmed she was no longer just a witness in its ongoing inquiry, but under investigation herself.
Resigning at this time is against every instinct in my being and something which I do not want to do. I love my job and I love serving this transition.
Once you have an ICAC, an Independent Commission Against Corruption, hearing focused on you politically, there is no way you could survive that, especially considering the state of New South Wales was heading into an election.
Thank you very much.
Do you regret not reporting Daryl Maguire earlier, Premier? What was done to Gladys Berejiklian, the people of New South Wales know, was an absolute disgrace, Mr. Speaker.
It really was not an option for the ICAC to do anything else other than investigate the potential breaches of public trust by the Premier. That's why the ICAC exists.
ICAC wanted to know why Berejiklian had not declared her relationship with Maguire under the Ministerial Code of Conduct. She was pressed about a 2018 text she had sent him saying, "But you are my family."
I had very strong feelings for him, yes.
but I didn't always feel that was reciprocated, and I didn't feel a level of commitment. No, I did not regard him as a member of my family. I regarded him as part of my love circle, part of people that I strongly cared for.
Matters of the heart were on public display.
I support the retention of ICAC. It fulfills a very valuable role. But at the end of the day, I don't see the need for her to be cross-examined about those personal relationships in public.
The Commission was actually very careful in how it used its powers. It did use private hearings. At the end of the day, we're talking about the personal relationship being the source of the potential conflict of interest.
Well, if we hadn't had public hearings, what would the public have known? At the time we went to the last state election, they would have known absolutely nothing.
One of the central questions was whether the former Premier had breached public trust and given unfair preference to projects in Maguire's electorate.
I just need to go and chill because you've tricked me.
All right, I'll go and chill. You just throw money at Wagga.
I'll throw money at Wagga, don't you worry about that.
Just listen to me.
The inquiry scrutinised $20 million set aside for the local Conservatorium of Music and a $5.5 million grant for a clay target shooting association. Senior bureaucrats testified that the project funding was unusual and unwarranted.
Why are we pushing a grant, an allocation of funds, through to a local member based on such scant and inadequate information that didn't meet the New South Wales Government's own standards and policies?
I believe that, that the Premier had a particular interest in this.
Berejiklian said she treated the member for Wagga Wagga as just another MP.
I was very, very conscious and very able to separate what occurred in my private life with what I exercised in my public responsibilities and my public duties.
But she admitted to pork barrelling, describing it as a fact of political life.
I don't think it's a surprise to anybody in and around government to know that we threw money at seats in order to keep them.
A line needs to be drawn for ICAC between investigating political decisions and investigating decisions that are motivated improperly by personal relationships.
We sought to have some of it resolved in parliamentary inquiries, but it's in that highly partisan, highly contested area. You really need to have an independent body to send these kinds of concerns to.
Berejiklian also faced allegations that she failed to report Maguire's conduct as possible corruption and that her actions may have encouraged corrupt conduct.
William tells me we've done our deal, so hopefully that's about half of all that's gone now.
That's good. I don't need to know about that bit.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
You do not.
The former Premier said she wasn't turning a blind eye, she was bored.
If I had at any stage assumed that there was any hint of corrupt activity, of course I would have reported that. Of course I would have done that. There is no reason why I wouldn't.
Today, after repeated delays, ICAC released its final report, finding Daryl Maguire had engaged in serious corrupt conduct, misusing his role as an MP to advance his and his associates' financial interests. It recommended his conduct be considered by the Director of Public Prosecutions. Maguire is already facing charges over giving false or misleading evidence to ICAC and over a cash for visas scheme. He's yet to enter pleas, but has denied acting corruptly. When it came to the former Premier, ICAC found Gladys Berejiklian had engaged in serious corrupt conduct. She'd breached the public trust by not disclosing her relationship with Daryl Maguire, gave preferential treatment to 2 of his projects, and failed to report her suspicion about his conduct. The Commission found,
for the Premier of the state to act dishonestly and improperly for their private benefit is egregious.
ICAC did not recommend the DPP consider charges.
The Commission is of the view that Ms Berijiklian's conduct, while it constitutes or involves a substantial breach of the ministerial code, is not so serious that it could be demonstrated to merit criminal punishment.
This week, Berejiklian's ally, Matt Keane, said she'd been subjected to a public political lynching, and in this tweet, he questions ICAC's findings. do you believe any of your comments have undermined confidence in ICAC?
No, I think ICAC's behaviour has undermined the public's confidence in ICAC through the lengthy delays in handing down their findings, through the public show that was put on through the release date, the media announcement of the release date, through the unbecoming behaviour of the ICAC inspectors coming into Parliament on live TV to hand over the report. I think ICAC themselves have damaged the public's confidence in them, and I think we need to restore the public's trust so that they can continue to do the important work that is the foundation of our democracy.
I think it says just how little the Liberal Party has learned. I'm hoping that they reflect on their position and end up joining with the people of New South Wales and backing ICAC before their partisan interests.
Berejiklian, who now works for Optus, thanked the public for its support and said her legal team is reviewing the findings. She said, "At all times I've worked my hardest in the public interest. Nothing in this report demonstrates otherwise." She's always maintained she's done nothing wrong.
If you're able to have your time again, you would not have disclosed your close personal relationship with Mr Maguire.
I would not have.
Ashley Raper is the ABC's state political reporter in New South Wales. She's covered the Berejiklian saga from the outset. Ashley, nice to have you on 7:30. Do you remember that moment when Gladys Berejiklian first talked about her relationship with Maguire?
I certainly do, Sarah. It was a Monday in October 2020 and I was watching the inquiry. It was on a little-known backbencher who was no longer in Parliament, but the Premier was called to give evidence, which most people thought was just standard, that she was just going to reflect on his time in Parliament and around what the ICAC was investigating. I was sitting at my desk, I had my earphones on, I was listening to it, and about 15 minutes in, Gladys Berejiklian used this term that she was in a close personal relationship. And I sat there and it was such a strange phrase, and I listened again and I can remember standing up at my desk almost yelling across the room saying, I think they were together. And that's what set off this chain. It was such a shock, but it was a shock to everybody.
Now, today, Gladys Berejiklian issued a statement. She says she's worked we saw it there, she worked in the public interest at all times. How does that align with what ICAC has found?
Well, it doesn't align at all. In fact, the ICAC has found that she essentially failed the public, but she breached the trust. And that was because of this conflict of interest with her public duties as an elected official, and she was Premier, she was Treasurer, and how that competed with her private relationship, her secret private relationship with Daryl Maguire. And the ICAC found that it influenced decisions that were made around public money, and that's why they found that she engaged in serious corrupt conduct.
Just tell me about that influence. How do they establish that relationship actually caused her to change her behaviour or do specific things?
Well, essentially it looked at, there was one case study around funding going to the Clay Target Association in the Wagga Wagga electorate, and it detailed quite significantly steps that were taken about Gladys Berejiklian as Treasurer, putting it on the agenda and pushing for that. But the ICAC didn't really want to make a judgment about their relationship. They presented what they said was a mosaic of evidence just about their relationship, and they released phone taps. So it was, when you put all the evidence together, they found that it did influence the allocation of public funds going to certain projects in Wagga. And they actually said that perhaps if she had disclosed the relationship and if people in the room, on the committee making the decisions around this, that the money wouldn't have gone to that particular project, the Clay Target Association, that it would have been quite a different outcome.
And to be clear, at the beginning of those meetings, this is in the Expenditure Review Committee, don't they have a declaration of conflicts of interest?
Yes, like they always do, and she did not declare this.
So she's sitting at the table when that conflict they call for conflicts. So what is going through her head? I think this is something that lots of people want to understand. What is it that is motivating her to go against what looks like common sense and decency, which you would normally ascribe to Gladys Berejiklian?
It is an interesting question, and it's been a very hard one to answer. Gladys Berejiklian herself says she was a very private person, that she didn't want that people to know. There's also a sense that she told the ICAC that the relationship wasn't of sufficient standing, and that's what she says. But that's at odds as what she talked about publicly. Now, there was a lot of political spin at the time that this relationship came out. It was a deliberate strategy to try and weather the storm that was coming after her relationship became public. But in that strategy, she sat down with commercial radio, with a gossip columnist in the tabloids, saying that she was in love with him, she wanted to have a family. So that was very much at odds with what she said. So it is a hard question to answer, but the ICAC effectively found that it was a significant relationship and she should have disclosed it.
Was it necessary for them to make public some of her communications with Maguire, because they are truly humiliating?
Yes, they are awful. Nobody wants their personal life laid bare like that. But at the end of the day, Gladys Berejiklian got into public life, and that is tough, but that comes with higher standards, and perhaps that is the consequence of going into that sort of life.
I mean, didn't she say there that she wouldn't do things differently? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, she did, and this was in the second set of hearings when she became the subject of investigation. So she had a long time. There was a year between the first round of public hearings where there was a shock revelation about her relationship, and a year later, and she still maintained that she wouldn't have disclosed it.
Now, there was another part of the report which said that she also failed to report suspicions of corruption on the part of Daryl Maguire. Now, obviously, he's a huge part of this, but we're more focused on her. What's so significant from ICAC's point of view about her not reporting what she may have suspected Daryl Maguire was doing in relation to the land deals he was involved with?
Yeah, so as part of the ICAC Act, and it is legislation, the ICAC was born out of the New South Wales Parliament, the Greiner government, all those years ago, and it's very clear in the legislation what constitutes corruption and what the duties are under this integrity agency. And one of the duties is to, if there is suspicion or enough evidence that there is suspicion of corrupt conduct by a fellow elected official, that they have a duty to report it. And Gladys Berejiklian didn't report it in this case. And there was a land deal that Daryl Maguire was involved in, and talking to Gladys Berejiklian, there were phone taps about them talking about it, and the ICAC found that it should have raised suspicions as how he was making so much money off this deal.
What's the phrase they used? Do they say she was willfully blind? Because she's always... What's her argument for this, that the relationship was not enough, was not sufficient to require her to report it?
That it wasn't sufficient standing to report. But just in terms
of... Willfully blindness is quite... It's a serious phrase, isn't it?
It is. It is a very serious phrase, especially because she was privy to all this information, because it wasn't just about... It was about him being an MP and being reported, but the conversations that they were having were intimate and detailed. So she had this information.
Now, I just want to go to what Matt Keane was saying there, because clearly there's a lot has been made of the fact that this has taken a very long time, and I don't know whether it would have moved any faster if she had reported suspicions earlier on. But does Matt Keane have a point that this has taken too long and it has damaged ICAC's standing?
The first part about timing, there is consensus that this has taken far too long, and there's actually been a move this week. The new Minns government in New South Wales will actually amend legislation, the ICAC legislation, and now the ICAC will have to set timeframes and publish those timeframes of when findings will be delivered. And the point of that is to avoid these lengthy delays. So that's one aspect. Now, Matt Keane has gone further in terms of his criticism of the ICAC. Now, there's very few coming out and talking about that. Certainly not the Premier, Chris Minns, certainly not Matt Keane's leader, the opposition leader, Mark Speakman. They're very supportive of the ICAC and their roles and processes, and have stopped short of broader reforms. But yes, on timing, there feels that this has taken too long and that shouldn't happen again.
Ashley Roper, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and from us, congratulations on a fantastic career at the ABC.